But basically, this was a study that was done at a music festival in Miami. Yes, it was Ultra. Where basically they asked a bunch of people about their drug use that week and wanted to find out basically like what was in their system. They got urine samples from these people, asked them what they took, and then based on what was in the urine samples, we were able to determine if what they thought they took lined up with what was actually in their system. And this occurred after someone died from ingesting APVP / Flocka the year before, I believe. So I think that had happened in 2014. This survey was done in 2015. And even though it was like a very small sample size, it just illustrated that people were going to this festival ingesting drugs, and there was way more in their system than they thought that they had actually ingested. So this was the chart, the graph is, of people who use recreational prescription drugs in the last week. 27% said no, 72% said yes, and then some people just didn't respond, but the majority of people responded. Roughly 3/4 of people responded yes. And the classes of drugs they admitted to taking were in this pie chart here: alcohol, cocaine, ecstasy, which, people anticipate would be MDMA, Molly, which again, people anticipate would be MDMA, and then MDMA. So if we took 5, 14, that's 19 plus 13. So you're looking at what's that? 33% of people who anticipated that they had taken MDMA, and then marijuana. The people who said that they basically took MDMA, in their blood samples, they found things such as 4-FA, alpha PVP, which is APVP, dimethylone, some MDMA, and methylone. Methylone is another synthetic cathinone. And that was in the blood samples. So blood samples and urine samples, that's a scientific thing of how long something can be detected in it. I think it's longer in blood samples. So that would explain why in urine samples there are even more positive hits. So that means that maybe is it in urine longer? I don't fucking know. Whatever, they did both. They found a shit ton of metabolites of these drugs in their urine samples. I believe it just depends on the part of the metabolic process that's happening with the drug, of when it goes from being in your blood to in your urine. Once it's in your urine, your body's kind of excreting it. And so over time, you're going to see less and less and less of that in your system, and it's coming out of your system. If it's in your blood, then it's probably still fairly active. So it's possible that some of these people, when they took when they had the samples collected, that shit was still popping off in their system. And then for the rest of them, they had already taken it maybe 24 hours ago, and it's now being excreted from their system. So they had even more samples of things that were being excreted from the system through urine, but had been ingested at some point. 4-FA, which is a psychedelic amphetamine. Yikes. Nobody mentioned anything about taking 4-FA. 4-FA doesn't fall into any of these categories. If someone was knowingly taking 4-FA, they'd tell you they took 4-FA. They wouldn't be like Molly, ecstasy, MDMA, or any of these other things that are nowhere close. So 4 samples of 4-FA, 13 samples of APVP, 6 of butylone, 9 of ethylone, 10 of dimethylone, 9 of MDMA, and 23 of methylone. So nobody admitted to taking anything but MDMA in that list. This is just breaking that down again with more specific numbers. Of the 104 participants who reported medicinal or recreational drug use within the last week, 29% have reported taking MDMA, ecstasy, or Molly. Again, those three things are in theory the same. 29% of people had taken something that should be MDMA only. None of the participants reported taking alpha PVP. However, alpha PVP was detected in samples from individuals who admitted to taking Molly and MDMA. So even the people who thought, I have MDMA, this is MDMA. This ain't no ecstasy or Molly or some other vague concoction with the name of this. This is MDMA. It was still not MDMA. Samples from subjects admitting Molly use contained MDMA, alpha PVP, methadone, ethylone, or butylone. Samples from subjects admitting MDMA use contained MDMA, alpha PVP, methadone, dimethylone, ethylone. Self-reported dosages range from 0.3 grams, 300 milligrams, up to 25 grams of MDMA, and 0.2 milligrams, 200 milligrams, up to 2.3 grams of Molly. So keeping in mind that there's all this shit in the samples that they had taken that they thought were only MDMA, there was all this shit in it, and they were taking doses that range from 300 milligrams to, the minimum of like 200 milligrams, which is like a common recreational dose in this type of setting, but it's actually a really high dose for the majority of people. Like 200 milligrams of MDMA, even if it's only MDMA, is actually a really high dose, and that's pretty risky and also unnecessary. You don't need that much MDMA. I went through MDMA psychotherapy. My dose was 160 milligrams, and that was a very high dose for therapeutic purposes. And I was being monitored. All my vitals are being monitored. Do not take 200 milligrams of MDMA and then go fucking dance for hours in a hot venue with no water or electrolytes, or you're in the sun. Like, please do not take 200 milligrams of MDMA. I've taken 200 milligrams of MDMA on multiple occasions, and let me tell you, it is not good for you. It's also a waste of MDMA. Save that extra 100 milligrams for another night. Let your serotonin recover. Damn. 200 milligrams to 200 milligrams to 25 grams. Like, not in one day, but over the course of, the week? Because they were doing this during Ultra Music Festival, which is only a weekend long festival, but it's Miami Music Week leading up to that weekend. Now there's like 2 weekends of Ultra Music Festival, which means it's 2 weeks of buffoonery and drug taking shenanigans. I mean, not that people aren't doing drugs during any other events. There's definitely people doing that shit all the time. But, these are times where people will particularly gather for that type of activity. Not judging. Totally was on lots of MDMA at Ultra Music Festival, which is why I'm telling you, do not take 200 milligrams. I had 250 milligrams at Ultra Music Festival, and I was lit, and I was not in good shape. I found a sprinkler at the Heineken tent. It was like this mister, and I just sat under that for about 20 minutes until I was shivering because I was overheating that bad. I would rather just be fucking cold because I thought I was gonna die. In Miami heat, it was like 5 p.m. and I thought the sun would go down sooner, and I really mistimed that shit. 250 milligrams of MDMA, and I knew it was 250 milligrams of MDMA, and I knew it was 250 milligrams of MDMA because it was a whole chunk of it that had been measured out. It was a whole chunk. It was a fucking chunk. It was a chunk of MDMA. Irresponsible. Please do not take 200 milligrams. I mean, unless you're like a 400-pound person, maybe. But for most people, your dose range 75 to like 120. you're good with that. And you can take more of MDMA if you want. If you feel like you're not really feeling it, and you're not on like SSRI, there's something that's blocking the production of serotonin that gives you those euphoric feelings, you can take more MDMA later. Just give it some time. If you're still not feeling the effects after taking more, you've got shitty MDMA. These people were taking tons of drugs that were not as much MDMA as they thought. Some of which clearly had to not be MDMA at all based on the numbers in those other charts. 9 of the samples contained MDMA in their urine and blood. Let's look at those numbers again. 9 was positive in urine, 3 was positive in blood. So, like, we're seeing like 13 samples here that were positive for APVP though. The fuck? Also, again, to put into perspective, this is a capsule of 5-HTP, packed, super fine 5-HTP, 200 milligrams. This might be, what someone would take a full capsule of MDMA. They would take this, roughly that size and amount. 25 grams is like how much sugar you'd find in a Coca-Cola. Like 25 grams, if that's 200 milligrams, 25 grams is like, I take 5 grams a day of creatine, and that's like a big scoop that might fill up like a spoon, like a soup spoon. I take that 2 times a day, so that's 10 grams of creatine. So that means if I was taking the same amount of creatine 5 times a day, that's how much fucking random ass drugs they put into their system over the course of a week. Damn, yo. That is a lot. There's a lot of drugs, period, but that's a lot of random ass drugs that y'all didn't even know y'all was taking. Here is some generic creatine. I have more than one type of creatine. This is just the, generic. This is the scoop. This is the scoop next to my mouth for next to my mouth for reference. And so this is 5 grams roughly. Like scrape the excess off the top. It's 5 grams. This is a lot. It's a lot. And this times 5 would be 25 milligrams. That's a fucking lot of creatine. So if I put this on the lid, I'm gonna have a Bill Nye moment here. Don't be worried about the creatine on my face. Sometimes creatine is found in cocaine. Creatine is a naturally occurring amino acid or whatever the fuck. It's fine. Our bodies use it. I'm not worried about it. Not worried about it. This is 25. This is 25 grams roughly of creatine. That's how much drugs y'all took. And like over the course of a week. And it was not all MDMA. That's not funny, but it's kind of funny. Anyway, just wanted to illustrate that for you all.